Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and this one has been long on the drawing board and often requested for the last little while. It's something I've kind of hinted at, spending a lot of time and energy thinking about over this season and over the last couple of months. And after the last couple of requests, I thought to heck with it. Let's just do it as a video. I'm not too sure how many of you will enjoy this, how many of you will actually watch it. Hopefully, for anyone who does catch it, it's interesting, put some food for thought out there. And as always, audience participation is welcome. Throughout the video, I'm going to do my best to really lay it out as concisely and neatly as possible, but that is quite a hard thing to do, as a lot of these topics can be at times. So we will go around the houses a couple of times. I'll make it as little as absolutely possible so we can get straight to the point and we can really look at the problems facing Celtic structurally, where the problems have been and where they've really shown themselves this year, what changes Celtic could, should and hopefully do make in the future if they are serious about getting their act together really and getting the train back on the tracks. And then we'll finish off the video with what I would do, essentially how I would restructure the club, how I would build Celtic to be the best version of itself absolutely possible. And at any point, if you do laugh, you learn, you find it interesting or whatever it might be, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, as well as match reactions and scouting and all the other stuff that we get up to here. Be sure to check it out. It'll be linked in the description. You'll be able to see it at the end of this one as well. But this topic today is a really big one, because when you talk about the structure of a football team, when you talk about the structure of Celtic in particular, the number one thing that comes in the requests that I get from you guys in the comment sections, DMs and all these other social media kind of outlets and whatnot is you want to know about the roles and responsibilities that other clubs have and the structures, what makes them successful. And there's a few problems with laying a few of them out, because Celtic is a PLC. It is owned by shareholders and the structure is dictated accordingly. A lot of the ones that we would like to look at with dewy eyes and think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a structure like them in the likes of Spain, Italy, Holland, Belgium even, maybe even Germany, is that they are structurally, fundamentally, completely different organisations from top to bottom. And it means their structures, although we can admire them and we can learn lessons and maybe even recruit some people from within them, they are only a piece of a puzzle. And this is a topic, a conversation that often comes up around Ketil Knutsen of Bodo Glimt, who has been quite a good example of a lot of the things that we have fallen short on, how a team with much less resources and much less inherent advantage or built-in advantage, as we say around here, can actually do, how high they can push, how big they can swing, and ultimately how successful they can be with the limited resources, the very limited resources that they have at their disposal. And at Celtic, we acknowledge as fans everywhere that we have limited resources, we have limited potential. We are not limitless in the regard of we can't become a Real Madrid level team or something to that effect, where you could win a record amount of Champions Leagues and you're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on players and all the rest of it. But we all, Celtic fans around the world, this is no acknowledge and recognise that we are so far beneath our potential. And with the current structure of the landscape of football, of European football, that potential has risen, I believe, in terms of the ceiling that we could reach, number one. But number two, even imagining a kind of moderate what our potential is, because of the change in the structure and the way things have moved, it has never been more exciting. It has never been potentially within our grasp, not to just reclaim the glory days of when I was younger, but to rewrite the history books and to really write a credible, formidable chapter in Celtic's long, prestigious history, as we are firmly now in a new generation of football, which we have been kind of slow to build up to. Now, when it comes to all the structure stuff, it does start at the top. You can't put the cart before the horse on this one. You do need to go to the very, very top. Now, we have a CEO in charge. And this is the current structure that we have at Celtic, where we have Michael Nicholson as the CEO, Chris Mackay at CFO, interim chairman Brian Wilson, and in terms of football, the only people we have represented here is Martin O'Neill as interim manager, I guess, as he calls himself, and Chris McCart is still the head of academy, the head of youth development, as I see it, as I've kind of found across here. In terms of who all works at Celtic and stuff like that, it's not really that easy to see everyone's position and where we really have a structure. It is quite hush-hush for the most things, which is very typically Celtic. And the reason we start off, we do have to start off at the tippy top, okay, because the CEO of every and any club, or the president or the lead person that we could think about, is a very distinct character, right? And I think for every example that we could look at, there's a few tropes, there's a few things that are going to show themselves time and time again, particularly in the football setting. From where I'm sitting, and I've been long of the opinion of this, Michael Nicholson isn't a CEO type figure. CEOs are normally very powerful people in terms of personality, conviction, confidence and such, but the one characteristic that they all definitely have in abundance is they delegate fantastically well. They understand that their strengths isn't absolutely every attribute that you could wish for a CEO or a football CEO, and they often, the successful ones anyway, are very, very good at delegating and bringing people in to share the vision and to carry the workload alongside them. And in Michael Nicholson's short time as CEO, there doesn't seem to have been any success, any movement, anything in that direction. And from all the public communication and for all the business stuff that we've heard happen at Celtic, he's just quite clearly not CEO type material. Now, chairman is kind of, I think some people would expect chairman to be above CEO in terms of company structure and whatnot, but the chairman for the most part is just the chair of the board. They just kind of lead all the board proceedings and make sure the meetings happen and take votes and all that kind of thing. But it's more ceremonial than actual practical. The CEO is the guy that's meant to be steering the ship. But the one thing that's apparent when you look at the Celtic structure is we are missing football nous. We are missing football brains, there's no other way of putting it, nous, minerals, people that actually know what the game's about, know what Celtic's about in the terms of playing for the club, what it means, the history, the prestige, the glory, everything that comes along with that. Now, we have had a change in CEO before, which has been of the sort of mould of what we're going to look at. Other clubs and different kind of parts of the food chain have done very successfully in the form of Dom Mackay, someone that's just much more of a commercial guy who understands that he is answerable to shareholders, answerable to fans, and is motivated to do successful things, wants to initiate positive change, modernisation, and actually move the club forward rather than just keeping it somewhat ticking along. If you look across the length and breadth of European and world football, there is a lot of different CEOs that are, I don't want to say quite household names, but they're names that you might be familiar with and are quite easily found information on. The top of the food chain with all of this is Ernst Soriano, the CEO of City Football Group. Now, I did a lot of background into everything that we're going to be talking about in the video. It took me a lot of time to put this together. And to give you the skinny on it, Ernst Soriano rose to prominence through Barcelona. Now, Barcelona, like I said before, structures can all be quite different. They vote for people in. It's much more of a members, it's much more of a fan sort of structure where it's, yes, it's a private business and all the rest of it, but some of the voting and the company structure and how all the different positions are populated is a lot more democratic and is a lot more driven by the fan base, by the members of the team. And he, as a businessman locally in Spain, kind of rises through the ranks at Barcelona before being headed by the Man City owners to take some of that Barcelona nous and bring it in to Manchester City. Now, Ernst Soriano isn't a football guy necessarily, isn't a scout, isn't a data whiz, nothing like that. He is just a hyper football businessman who has went right to the very top of the game, and Man City have been the most hyper aggressive and wildly successful outfit for the last 10-15 years while he's been at the helm. But the person that gets the majority of success for Man City isn't CEO Ernst Soriano, although he has been a huge part in bringing Pep Guardiola, opening up all these other clubs that they own, the transfer fees that they've been able to do, navigating FSR and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's actually Cheeky Bergstein, who is down as being the director of football at Manchester City. And these two guys as a tandem are what has made Man City Man City. There is an army, a legion of scouts and youth coaches and all that other stuff that goes into the structure. But the owner gives these guys the position. The CEO knows he can do some of the football stuff, the business stuff, but he needs someone that can actually identify good players from bad players, can close deals, can build relationships with different clubs and agents and managers ultimately to bring success to the football team. And the reason we're starting with this in the way that we're starting with it is to highlight that the CEO, although the leader of the club, the leader of the organisation, the guy that is steering the ship, is very rarely, if ever, the actual football nous, the actual football person. This person very regularly is a strong entrepreneurial type figure that is a leader and they can drive a vision and deliver a vision ultimately and they are regularly flanked by someone that knows the game, that knows what it's like to be in the trenches. In a lot of cases are former players, and in many more cases, of course, have just been in the industry. They've kind of worked their way up and found good people to work with, and partnerships kind of go on from here. And on this note, I'll just bring this into conversation now because it'll probably come up again later. There's so many people that do such a great job, and the one thing you notice when you look at all of them is they're part of maybe even a duet. So many of these successful things we're going to look at is two people that can work very successfully together and find themselves in a club structure that just allows them to get on with it. And with Man City, it is Ferran Soriano and Cheeky Bergstein. Now, Brighton is one of the teams that gets often kind of brought up in these conversations for good structures and maximising resources and all the rest of it. And we, of course, all know Tony Bloom. Now, Tony Bloom's a bit of an anomaly because he is actually like the 95% shareholder in Brighton, and he is football now, so he's a football data guy. But Paul Barber is actually the CEO of Brighton, and he is widely recognised as being one of the best CEOs in football, period. And he, alongside Tony Bloom, have managed to get on with the business and the football element of the club in tandem together, where this guy is obviously, he's been in Brighton since 2012, so he's got a long-standing relationship with Tony Bloom. And when you understand how he works, and we've seen it up close and personal in Scottish football this year, again, fantastic at delegating. He's going to stick to the stuff, Tony Bloom this is, of what he brings to the table, what he brings to the party, and he lists and trusts somebody else to cover all other bases, and they've worked fantastically well together as a tandem, and ultimately Brighton has been the beneficiary of that. And again, beneath these guys there is a legion scouts, of agents, of youth coaches and managers even that have came and went and brought success at a good velocity. By the way, Brighton have changed manager quite a bit since they've been in the Premier League, and they've never really been in threat of relegation. Sure, they've never been consistently successful year on year, maybe not progressed year on year, but they're certainly never ever going backwards, you would say. Now, one of the clubs I was most interested to look into in a lot more detail when it comes to the leadership, when it comes to the CEO, the president, whatever it might be, of what's driven them over recent years, is Club Brugge. And the reason for that, and the man in question is Vincent Manhart here. Because when I was growing up, and maybe some of you, depending on how old you were, Anderlecht were the only team in Belgium, similar to Rosenborg were like the only team in Norway. They were always the one that would qualify from that nation for the Champions League, and generally always got scudded. Kind of like us sometimes, maybe not when Martin O'Neill was around. And even Dinamo Zagreb have been a bit of a trope in that nature whenever they've been in Champions League. But again, domestic dominator that didn't ever really kick on. But as we can all see in recent times, and especially over the last 5 or 6 years, you can really see what they've been up to. They have absolutely transformed themselves. Now, he is a former player, and he spent 13, 14 years at Bruges as the CEO. Now he's the sporting director for the Belgium FA, essentially the national team, after the success that he's had with Bruges over 13, 14 years, whatever it is, all told. And the thing that really makes this guy stand out is he brought in a very clear club identity and long-term strategy, and a very well-known philosophy that Bruges fans and everyone in Belgium kind of came to know from this guy, which was know exactly who we are and where we stand in the football world. Now, this is something that Celtic fans we are now kind of dying for. I think the problem is we've kind of been victim of that, because we've looked at that through a very pessimistic lens. You only need to look and listen at the Ross Desmond statement at the AGM recently, as well as all of Celtic's business practice outside of the Hinge Postecoglou era, really, to see that there is this pessimistic view on progression in Europe, and even trying to firmly establish even just your own corner of world football to the level that Bruges has. This included a consistent playing style, recruitment principles, and a shared vision across all departments: first team, academy, scouting, and commercial. And maybe a bit similar to Brighton, the person that he worked in tandem with was actually the club president. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but he's widely seen as the financier of Bruges, helping them pay the transfer fees that they have and everything else around it. Again, Bruges are a self-sustaining club at this point. They've made tons of profit over the years from Champions League participation as well as selling players, but that's not always been the case. They've been very much a speculate to accumulate type team, and they've done very well at picking their battles. Belgium does have some unique creases to it, where immigration laws are a bit different, and visas and that kind of thing, where they can take players in from all corners of the earth essentially very easily, especially by comparison to us in the UK. Now, when I look at our structure once again, and this is maybe still a wee bit of table setting, so apologies, right? CEO Michael Nicholson isn't a great CEO. We're expecting him to be working in tandem. It feels like the tandem is him and Chris Mackay for the most part. And there's no successful club that you're going to find that has a chief financial officer involved in the football stuff, that has a CFO involved to the extent that Chris Mackay seems to be in the player trading and the recruitment model. Because these people, again, it's an old saying, isn't it, about like letting lawyers and accountants run companies are just never going to actually go forward. They're always going to go backwards because these people by nature are conservative, are risk adverse, are play it safe, are don't risk anything, don't lose anything. Is the tandem maybe Dermot Desmond and one of these people? Because again, Dermot Desmond is the financier, apparently, although no money is ever put in from that side. But the people who control the purse strings, the people that control the bank balance, the wallet, the credit card, whatever you want to think of it as, the checkbook, are the ones that make the decisions ultimately. And the people that they hire and put into position have to kind of fall in line with what they have. So when we look at the very top, with Dermot Desmond, his obvious control and influence on the board and everyone that works at Celtic being kind of undeniable at this point, it's very hard to imagine a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about in the video is really actually going to happen dramatically, and we're probably going to do it on the cheap. We're probably going to do it half-baked, as is the Celtic way. And what I mean by that is going out and just appointing a sporting director or a director of football, which is normally what I think a lot of people would expect to see and hear us talk about in a video like this, because for the most part, particularly when you look down in England, you don't really hear about the Glazers or Todd Bowley and all these other big mega rich owners getting involved in the day-to-day, getting their hands dirty. Again, these people generally are very successful because they are elite at recruitment and delegating, which again we don't seem to be. But when you look at those structures, who stands out to be the guy that is pulling the strings, that is steering the ship, is the director of football. And when you look at director of football, the number one, the star guy, the Jose Mourinho, the Pep Guardiola, whatever you want to think of him as, is Monchi. Now, he's had fantastic, unprecedented success as Sevilla director of football for a number of years. He was there from 2000 to 2017 before going to Roma for a short time. We'll talk about that in a second. Before returning to Sevilla and then following close ally and successful guy that they've worked together with, Unai, to Aston Villa, where they've qualified for the Champions League, and Aston Villa have really transformed under Unai Emery. But also Monchi, that's been a duet situation. Monchi obviously is left to become club president. I think this is his local team in the summer of 2025, just gone. And this is what I think a lot of Celtic fans expect, is we just hire a new director of football, just a guy to come in. We're not going to change CEO, CFO, company structure, anything like that. But let's just hire a guy that can be in charge of all the football stuff. They can have a bit more autonomy on the transfer budget, on the decision making of managers and players and all the rest of it. But hiring a director of football like a Monchi, for example, and to stick on the Monchi example for a moment, Aston Villa are owned by mega wealthy people. They hire him and they give him the same license that the likes of Chicky Bergstein is given at Man City, where you're in charge, success and failure, the sword falls on you for that. Make it work, here's your budget, get on with it. And would we do that at Celtic? I don't think so. We would need to if we weren't bringing a director of football in who can pull together with the CEO. It feels like we would be bringing someone in who would be answerable to a CEO, and that's an important distinction to make here, because Monchi then at Aston Villa, in that type of situation where he is answerable to the ones above him, brings in the manager Unai Emery. Unai Emery is still there, Monchi isn't. That's maybe a bit unusual because normally managers turn over a lot quicker than these types of guys. And at Celtic, sadly, I don't think we're really in a position where we could look at a sporting director and give him not only free, not I don't think that not that I think we couldn't, I just don't think we will, give him free rein on managerial appointments and then totally revamping the transfer strategy, transfer policy, budgets and spend and all the rest of it. But we are in need of a director of football, and it's about how you fit them into the structure, what part, how do they complement? Do they complement the head of the organisation, as it were, or do they couple into a football structure a little bit further down and beneath? Another one of these names, which is a bit of a, I don't want to say quite celebrity, but a famous director of football that you might have heard of and has for better or worse, some kind of harrowing tales out there, is Sven Mittelstadt. Now, this guy's got a pretty successful career. He's just been appointed sporting CEO, and that's a phrase to remember for later on in the video. Again, German clubs are very differently structured, where they have full sporting boards as well as the actual company board, which is focused on commercial things and everything else. But he has had a pretty solid career, famously at Borussia Dortmund under the Jurgen Klopp era, bringing through the likes of Lewandowski, Marco Reus, and all these other types of guys. Before going to Arsenal in the post-Arsene Wenger era, which, again, didn't really gel, didn't really work out. He then goes to Stuttgart. Stuttgart were in Bundesliga 2 back here. And Stuttgart, since returning to the Bundesliga, they have done very, very well. He did so well at Stuttgart that Ajax brought him in. And the reason that's something to be noted is Ajax, kind of similar to Celtic, it's unusual that they would bring prominent figures from way outside the normal circles, as it were, to have such a prominent role in how they're ran as a team. It didn't work very well. They didn't enjoy how agent dependent he was, and a lot of the players that he brought to Ajax, they just feel didn't fit everything, and it's been a bit of a failure, actually, to be honest with you. And that's a good example of just transplanting a guy in who can operate at Borussia Dortmund, Arsenal, to whatever success levels you want to discuss there, and in Stuttgart, but can't fit in at Ajax. It doesn't feel like levels-wise that makes sense, but we understand different environments, identities, fabrics of different football teams. It's not a huge surprise, really, is it? Before returning back to Borussia Dortmund to do some scouting and technical director work before ending up at Dusseldorf, who are in Bundesliga 2 as CEO. So I think he's a nice example of just that kind of going in by itself. But really, good sporting directors come in all shapes and sizes. And I've put Dougie Freeman here on screen. He's actually out in the Middle East right now with a Saudi Arabian team. But he got a really big name for himself recently for his time at Crystal Palace, where he was there for 8 years before having a little stint as a manager in amongst League One, sorry, French stuff coming out of me there, and the Championship. Now, the reason I want to highlight Dougie Freeman here, right, is because Dougie Freeman isn't a fancy name. He's not a guy that's went and really learned the cutting edge of modern day football and is really a guy that can look into the future and unearth these crazy talents from these wacky corners of the earth. Dougie Freeman was doing a fantastic job for Crystal Palace at sourcing and maximising local talent in the South London area, but also guys like Michael Olise. They signed him from Reading, I'm pretty sure it was. Eberechi, they signed from QPR. He just got fantastically good at understanding who were those players that were going to move to being Premier League level. Maybe they're already playing at the Championship, maybe they're coming through youth level, and he just had an eye for people that could make that jump. And in Crystal Palace, through different managers and squads that they've had, some players have gone on to be wildly successful, some of them have done okay, and everything else that goes around it. But I want to use him in this video as an example of, it doesn't need to be a guy that's went out there and really got this crazy track record. You really need to know the man. You really need to know what the person brings. And again, Dougie Freeman at Crystal Palace, those things are completely aligned, where they know we need a guy that can really source those pre-Premier League talents, and we'll give them a platform to try and kick on and to try and again, Crystal Palace over this time were also a top-end Championship club. So again, different sizes, different styles of clubs, different places that they're in, different challenges and different opportunities that they have, with everyone having relatively limited resources to one extent or another. It's not always about just getting the big shiny modern day thinker, but sometimes it's just somebody that knows what their job is inside out. Would I bring Dougie Freeman to Celtic? Not unless we're after maximising London talent and getting into that market ahead of Crystal Palace and whatever. So probably not. Where I think if we were to like transplant a guy in, like hire, like if we think about our Sven Mittelstadt kind of mistakes that we're waiting to make, you would look across European football and you would look at other sporting directors of football. They've got a few different titles. It's all essentially the same job. The people that are in charge of balancing the budgets, making sure the first team is as strong as possible, and making profit at every single occasion. And it wouldn't take long before you'd be looking at the name of Sean Sorliano, is I think how you're going to say it, the sporting director at Hellas Verona for the last 3, 4, 5 seasons. And Hellas Verona is a team that has been in our rumour mill quite a few times. They just signed Kieran Bowie, they were in the race with us for Adam Ida, and Hellas Verona have done a stellar job in the transfer market over recent years. Domestically, they've not really achieved very much, but Sean Sorliano here has certainly shown himself to be a very capable capable and very ambitious operator in the transfer market. And Hellas Verona, yes, they're in a big five league Serie A, but they do not have any level of resources that Celtic have. And this is his tale of the tape as sporting director at Hellas Verona. Now, the first season that he's in charge, they make a basically a €10 million loss. As you can see with the summary that we've got here prepared on screen, they signed players like Simeone, Giovanni Simeone, Isaac Keane, who's now Atalanta, we'll get to that, Cabal and Gong, and then a bunch of other players like Sakanye and Barak that they'd sold for a few quid. But the summer thereafter, they make a profit of €87 million. We have never had a window as profitable as that. Although we have had some very good sales and some consistent profit year on year, we have never had a stellar summer that has really jet-setted us and moved us up a price category. Similarly to clubs that have done this, obviously Verona's on screen here, but Ajax, Porto, Benfica, Brugge, take your pick, they've all had a summer where they've made crazy money off of selling 2 or 3 players after having a bit of a golden crop, a bit of a golden generation. But it doesn't stop there. The season after, he also made a €30 million profit. And the season that we're in so far, and maybe there's some other sell-on clauses that could kick in or something, they've made a modest €7 million because they've sold their whole squad and they've maybe not quite regenerated as of yet. But this is the guy that is swimming with sharks. He is getting players that are super cheap, that have a lot of upside, that have a lot of potential, and on the modest platform of Hellas Verona and Serie A, he has managed to turn hundreds of profit out there. Giving a guy like this the ability to represent a club as huge as Celtic with the prospect of European football, being able to propel players into the Premier League and every league really across European and world football, depending on how well they do, I dare say he could do a damn sight better than many sporting directors out there. And if you were looking for a player, I beg your pardon, a candidate out there from European football who's operating at a decent level and is showing a bit of a track record, then this is a really strong candidate. But if he was to come in and be answerable to CFO Chris Mackay, CEO Michael Nicholson, play the stupid rules that we've got now with 3 million transfer spends and all the rest of it, it's not going to work out too well. Now, if a director of football, if a sporting director like this can be left to their own devices with a manager that they can get on the same page with and build a squad around, at least for the next 2 to 3 seasons, then this is something that could work. I just fear that parachuting a guy in like this into the current structure as we already find it is a recipe for disaster. It's got disaster written all over it. I've used Jens Bertolescu as just a first team manager placeholder here because I think if you're going to do this sporting director role, you do need to give them the level of power, decision making, whatnot, where they will be here longer than the manager. That is the intention. And the manager maybe, or certainly now, becomes much more of that head coach, where you've got somebody else as the architect for the team, keeping an eye on, right, we're about to sell Arne Engels, Matt O'Reilly, Kuhn, whoever it is, and already knows we've got these irons in the fire to bring these new players in to keep the squad where it's going. And the managers will fall into the same category where, imagine it's Jens Bertolescu, we're 3 years down the road, he's going to move on or we're going to sack him, whatever's happened. They need to be the person that knows this is the sort of manager that will complement the squad as we've got it. So they need to be quite up in a position of power here. And like I've tried to highlight, there needs to be a tandem, there needs to be a duet type symbiotic scenario here. There's no football nous in the boardroom. Could putting somebody like Martin O'Neill in as chairman be a bit of a solution in this situation as well? I think it could be. I've tried to say this before in different ways, and I think after analysing this whole thing in a lot more detail, the role of chairman is kind of what I was meaning when I said before, Martin O'Neill as director of football could be really interesting or effective, because all you're really after from someone like Martin O'Neill in that upper level position in the hierarchy is to talk to Dermot Desmond and to get him to waking up to reality and the modern climate. So I think having Martin O'Neill in that chairman is a borderline ceremonial position anyway. I'm sure he'll get a wee wage out of it and whatever, but Martin O'Neill can be the face of the club. He can speak to the fans, the media about all these matters. It wouldn't need to be Michael Nicholson or Chris Mackay or whoever else. Martin O'Neill can do that. He can convey the messages of the club from the inner workings to the outside. The appointment of a Sean Sorliano or an appointment of Jens Bertolescu, the sacking of people, the transfer of players, whatever it might be. And again, would be a very good figure to have involved in crunch negotiations and whatever, because he is a charismatic guy. He is the fabric of the club, and just to keep his kind of name in the video. I thought, why not just put Martin O'Neill there? Because Brian Wilson's interim chairman, and I'm not sure there's anyone from the batch in there where it's like, okay, make them chairman. So I'm not really saying Martin O'Neill should be chairman, but why not? And I've just put him there as kind of a placeholder for the video. So this is the sort of structure that we would be looking to get changed up. Now, the second part of this, I say, we need to kind of start from the top and move your way down, right? Because there's been a lot of rumours and stuff that we've just hired a head of business, which is one of Michael Nicholson's pals. And if we are putting extra manpower, brain power into the business side of the club, then cool, fine. That's got a place in the modern climate. Celtic are definitely dropping the ball in a lot of areas, including fan engagement and fan satisfaction. So hopefully that can pull in that direction. And I've not really spent much time on the business side of things in this video. I'm trying to focus on the football as much as possible. And let's imagine you did this sort of scenario, which is what I think the likely change that Celtic are going to try and undertake is going to look like. This guy might not work out, Sorliano, or pick your name. It could be anyone. It might not fit, it might not work. The manager might not fit, might not work. And you're going to go through a period of time like Man United have, and Newcastle and Liverpool, where you're turning these people over all the time and you're not really gaining any ground. You're not really moving the club forward in any way, because ultimately they're going to be hamstrung by the people above them and by what is beneath them. And if we look at the last slide here, where we have Chris McCart in situ, we have the legacy youth academy structure of coaches and system and everything else, which has came under a lot of scrutiny. Celtic as a club, and every one of the clubs that we're going to look at, or I've looked at in preparation for this, that you would consider a peer, a club that we should be matching or even beating in a lot of cases, they all have prominent, well-established conveyor belts of youth talent out of their academy, and we have not had that for years. The club openly say that part of their agenda, part of their goal is to produce Champions League level players. And yes, we've just built Barrowfield. CeltsAreHere, we've actually put a request in. We want to go and see Barrowfield. We want to see the facilities and have a look and see what Celtic are doing to prepare Champions League players out of the academy. They have yet to get back to us and allow us anything or talk to us really about it. So TBC on that one. Maybe we'll get inside to have a look at it. I'm not going to hold my breath. But I also think whoever is going to come in, or any sort of new look Celtic structure, we have to change the academy structure. We have to change our intake of youth talent and how much we put a focus on producing local domestic talent. It benefits us greatly, of course, for Champions League registration, squad sizes and everything else as well. But it is the cheat code of all cheat codes that all these other clubs do to make big money so they can reinvest it in the playing squad to make themselves bigger, better and stronger year on year. It's been able to sell players like we did a few times, Aidan McGeady and Kieran Tierney, and there's maybe one or two in there that I'm forgetting that are less headline making. But a guy like this isn't focused, a sporting director, a director of football type person, isn't bringing that to the party as standard. Some of them do, don't get me wrong. And I think as I bring the bottom of this into the conversation, this is what I kind of mentioned in the intro, you kind of need to go around the houses a little bit with this, right? Because the top is very important for steering the ship, allowing the freedom of people to do their job and maximise their own positions and the potential of the club. But also you need the absolute grassroots to be green and growing, because you can't always go into the transfer market and pull out wild talent at very nominal prices. You need players that can be a part of the squad for a long time, that know the fabric of the team. We have some players kind of like that now. Not everyone is a fan of them. I'm not going to name them. But in the same breath as we want to produce Champions League players, we don't produce any players that can really keep the squad ticking over and really give the manager, if we are changing managers and all this other stuff, we lose key players, the freedom to breathe for a window or two where we can recalibrate and rebuild and recycle everything. And saving Scottish football or redeveloping Scottish youth football is another topic I could spend an eternity talking about, in terms of where we're missing opportunities and everything as well. And this is the point of the video that brings me on to really what I would do, because I just don't think there's actually a solution in the current structure that Celtic are going to make in the summer or in any time soon that is going to dramatically change anything. I'll say it again just to summarise up this section, but change Michael Nicholson for an entrepreneurial, aggressive, sport-minded but very successful business person, CEO, and then allow them to delegate into all these other areas a lot better effectively than what Celtic have in the past. We have tried that before with Don Mackay. It wasn't allowed to happen, so I find it very unlikely. But if we could change CEO, I think things could trickle down and change very quickly, because the CEO, you would imagine, has the backing of the shareholders to run the company as best as possible. Now, if it was me, if I was in charge of Celtic and I was Dermot Desmond or whatever, the very first thing I would do is I would hire Ernst Tanner as sporting CEO, and I would make a real distinction between that and the club. Like I mentioned before, it's hard to, even in any scenario, the current board's been totally rebuilt and restructured and all the rest of it. You do need to give Celtic some credit where it's due, that business-wise, it's kind of hard to argue with a lot of the results and the numbers that they've produced. Of course, we all know it's at the detriment of the football side of things, which is what needs balance brought back to it. But I would just draw a line through the middle of the club, leave all those guys where they are. I would remove Michael Nicholson still as CEO and probably put him in places like Chief of Legal Affairs or whatever he was before he was CEO. And I'd make Ernst Tanner sporting CEO. I don't think you want him running the whole company and the club or whatever the same way Michael Nicholson does right now as the out and out CEO. This guy has done everything. I mean, everything that you would want to happen at Celtic over any time period you care to think about. I'm aware of this guy down to the work he's done at the Philadelphia Union. Now, Philadelphia Union, of course, is in America and all the rest of it. Philadelphia is a big city in Pennsylvania. Philadelphia itself has a population of 1.5 million people. Pennsylvania State has a population of 13 million people. In terms of the landmass size, Pennsylvania is 44, just basically 45 thousand square miles. Scotland is 30,000 square miles. Okay. Now, the reason this kind of context is important, right, is Philadelphia's it's kind of Glasgow size, maybe a bit bigger than Glasgow, but Pennsylvania, the area that he's working in, and it's probably even including some of the New York area, Delaware, Maryland, all these places as well. They have managed to get the best, in my opinion, youth development network in North America, in American soccer. Now, say what you will about MLS in America and all the rest of it, but this team has produced Champions League players, and I'm talking about multiple, not just one or two, like half a dozen or so over the last 5 or 6 years. It's produced a lot of internationals. It's produced players that have went on to play in Europe's top leagues. They have not got football. This isn't Iceland or Germany or Holland or anything like that. There's not football coaches, soccer coaches, whatever, everywhere, pitches everywhere. There's not huge availability, and it's quite a landmass. As you can see, there's not cities everywhere, and you do have a lot of the same logistical problems to some extent, maybe even to a greater extent, than what you would have in Scotland. And this guy in that landscape has turned Philadelphia from one of the worst teams in the league. And I mean, look at the results. Before he was there, before recent times, they were down and out. They were a very bad outfit, didn't have talent. America's got better and all the rest of it, fine. Prior to being at the Philadelphia Union, he was academy director at Salzburg for 6 years, as well as being CEO of Hoffenheim, the director of football at Hoffenheim as well for a number of years prior to that. He has literally done everything you would want. And if this guy was given, well, I would give him sporting CEO at Celtic. I think you're going to get him out of America by giving him some sort of promotion. I don't think you could give him director of football or sporting director thing, but you would also want him not only to oversee the modernisation of the football structure in line with Salzburg Academy experience and all the rest of their stuff, modern Bundesliga structures and everything as well, but also be able to maximise that pipeline of talent across Scotland, how to get coaches uniform, how to get players kind of uniform in the mindset of these are the metrics and these are the hurdles to overcome. And then this is how we funnel you all into the first team for the players who are good enough. So we don't lose talent to down south, or we just have talent that gets underdeveloped and just falls by the wayside. But similarly to a CEO, a sporting CEO is the overseer, is driving the entire ship of Celtic's vision. Imagine we appoint this guy in the summer. By 10 years' time, we want to be an established Champions League club. That could be 10 Champions League games a season in the current format. It could be 12, whatever your goal would be. But by 10 years' time, that's where we want to see ourselves. We want to see ourselves have 5 homegrown players consistently. We could set all sorts of metrics like that, and it would be him that would be in charge of overseeing and bringing it all together. We would still need some immediate term change, though, to affect the first team and to help the first team get up and running sooner rather than later. And we would still need, in my opinion, in this kind of scenario, if I was going to rebuild it, a director of football. We could use one of the examples that we spoke about before, the Sean Sorliano or like your Sven Mittelstats, that kind of person, and have them go under an Ernst Tanner or whatever. But I do feel that relationships and people building the structure themselves is the way to go. What I would like to do with some of these positions is use, again, sort of placeholders, okay? And Paul Lambert is one of these people that I think Celtic is wildly underused. He's got very strong relationships with German football. He's down as being a developmental international relations person for Borussia Dortmund. He's done a number of scouting missions as well for a number of clubs. He's been a manager in his own right as well, as a European Cup winner, and as a guy that, when I look at these other teams across Spain, Italy and Germany in particular, they have high ranking, well decorated players involved in this stuff. Because see, when you're going to try and sign players and other clubs are interested, you need someone with a bit of gravitas. You also need someone that's walked the walk to be able to close these deals, be able to get players to buy into it. And there's a few guys you could put into this type of situation, but I think Paul Lambert's vision of German football and what standards he knows are kind of brought from, and I know he played there a long time ago, but even in the modern time, he is involved in, see what Borussia Dortmund are all about. He gets quite a lot of access in with them. As if you follow Paul Lambert, you'll see he's kind of over there all the time and whatnot. And just not having the Scottish fishbowl mentality is kind of what I'm after from the director of football. They don't need to have medals around their neck necessarily. They don't necessarily need to be a former player, but it needs to be somebody, I think, that isn't like just in the Scottish goldfish bowl of let's just go and sign the best guy from Hibs kind of attitude. And to make it really clear at this point, in this other structure, or in most of these cases, the director of football, their job, like we mentioned before with like the Monchi example and one or two others, is that they need to be thinking about the managerial appointments and the recruitment strategy and overall like who's coming through from the youth teams, and they need to kind of see the football immediate term over the next 3 to 5 seasons, who's coming and going and who's playing a part, and how do they need to make a change now, or who are they going to bring in when this guy moves on. So that's maybe a good way of thinking about what that role involves. And you would want to bring in someone to be a head of recruitment. I don't really want to call them a chief scout. I want to call them head of recruitment. Maybe pathway manager was something that was made to be somewhat adjacent to this role, but you want, again, someone that is really got their finger on the pulse with the local players that are coming through. We have missed out on a lot of talent. We could have got a lot younger, whether that be actual youth prospects or first team players that maybe didn't quite. Lennon Miller kind of slipped through our grasp, but maybe feels like the likes of somebody like a Josh Mulligan, the same thing could happen maybe come this summer. And you want someone that can make those deals happen nice and smoothly and quickly. But you also want someone that is really well versed in the business side of football. Jackie McNamara, by all accounts, is an agent himself and runs his own kind of recruitment business within Scottish football at the moment. Maybe doesn't have the broader horizons, which is why Paul Lambert was very much in my thinking earlier. But as someone that knows the game, knows the script, knows what fees are, knows what's expected of players and agents and managers, and in the best interest of Celtic, I believe, could be a very effective head of recruitment, where, again, a guy that's very much up to speed. He's in the trenches with this stuff day to day for what metrics work, what different processes are coming in and out of vogue. And I think if you had someone like McNamara, and you could be anyone else, but again, I'm just using him as a placeholder, as a head of recruitment alongside a director of football and the likes of someone like a Paul Lambert, that could be a great tandem. That could be a great duet of people that know all the right stuff, have a bit about them, and can kind of lead the football, the immediate, what we're doing this season and next season, who we're buying and selling aspect of the club kind of forward together. And again, I'm hastening to put this into the video over and over again. If you look at all of these other clubs that you want to look at, a lot of the people that are the highest regarded in recruitment are in their 30s or maybe even in their 20s. That scouting and recruitment is a young man's game at this point in time, and there's no one out there that's got this incredible track record of whatever from all these other clubs and go, oh yeah, he's the guy, sign him and you'll definitely get the inside track on the emerging talent or anything like that. Time and time again, it's people in a coherent structure that just pull in the same direction. So I think we should be constantly populating the scouting department with up-and-coming scouts, these kind of newer thinkers, some of these people that maybe have a bit of a CV already, and moving to Celtic would be a step up in their career. But also, can we generate some of that ourselves? Can we have someone like a McNamara that would oversee recruitment and be in charge of hiring scouts, different areas, and even themselves, young scouts, older scouts, people for different regions and areas, and kind of oversee the whole thing and kind of pull it together? in tandem with the director of football. And then I would be looking at somebody, I've got Paul McStay here, right? Because he's got his own company. It's a data analytics company that focuses on coaching and performance metrics at grassroots level. So I've already mentioned Ernst Tanner and the whole kind of like trying to maximise the local resources, being able to produce Champions League players. I don't think he's ever going to be the guy with feet on the ground. Maybe Paul McStay wouldn't quite be that person either. But he's the one that could actually meet with coaches, meet with players, see how everyone's doing at different age groups, make sure that kind of funnel thing. Again, player pathway managers may be somewhat adjacent to this, which is a position the club did try and get off the ground, which is just probably going to be abandoned at this point with Sean Maloney and his future and conversations for another day. But I don't want to sit here and say get Chris McCart out and sack all the youth coaches and bring new youth. I just think the whole youth structure has missed cohesion. Over recent years, it's become quite obvious from what everyone sees and what everyone tells us that the B team and the youth teams mirror the first team. And when we're changing manager all the time, it's just a recipe again for disaster. You're constantly changing what a good player, what a useful player is to you. And when players are at these formative years in their development and in their education, being taught different things, getting pulled from left to right about different positions and roles and responsibilities, doesn't suit anyone, doesn't help anyone. And I think you need a consistent rod that goes all the way through the play style of what is coming through the academy and what will go into the first team. And that is for coaches as well. John Kennedy's left a massive void in the club. And yeah, it's great to see McManus maybe step up a bit and maybe he can fill that void in terms of on the coaching pitch. And maybe there's somebody else that could do the same. But it's jobs for the boys, former player stuff. We would like to produce our own talent. And maybe in some of these crazy times, it just rear their head in football like the season we've had. If we had a really up and coming, exciting assistant manager or a B team manager or something, you could walk yourself into like a wonder kid manager type situation where you're not going out there and having to find someone from outside. You might even get to the position where you can produce once in a while your own head coach that actually fits the system seamlessly, can steady the ship from time to time, and maybe even could be successful in their own right. And again, the former players, I'm using them mainly as placeholders. If you're up for any of them, cool. I'll take all the support, fine. If you get better suggestions, they're welcome as well. But it's the style, it's the profile, it's what they actually bring to the party is what I think is kind of needed here. So this is what it would look like. I'd have a kind of split system where you've got the sporting side of the club as well as just the corporate stuff, which has been kind of long lasting and ever present. Again, I've used Jens Bertolascu as the head coach type avatar, as it were, for this. But with a sporting CEO in charge who has a track record of doing absolutely everything that we want to do as a club, produce Champions League players, build a cohesive system from grassroots to first team, of a play style, of an identity, professionalising the whole structure of performance analysis with him and obviously Paul McStay kind of being the man that would go out and action it. Your likes of your Lamberts or your McNamara, your head of recruitment, your director of football that can take charge and ownership of who's the manager for now, who's the manager for tomorrow, what squad do we have for the Champions League next year, and you know what, when we sell these guys, who are we bringing in and behind them? That's how much heavy lifting there is that's needing done at Celtic that we don't do right now. And all of that is currently being done or not being done, depending on how you want to think of it, by this current structure. We are severely undermanned when it comes to football now. So that's the number one thing I would inject into the club above all else, however you want to do it. But I think the fabric of the team is important to go in. Even if in some wacky alternative reality, this structure was put into place, the only one that you need there long term is the sporting CEO. The rest of the guys could kind of come and go if they weren't great fits and you recruit better from maybe from within, or just a natural recruitment process where you allow people to apply their CVs and the best man gets the job type idea, which is not something Celtic have often done with these make or break fundamental football strategic appointments. It doesn't feel like that often happens. And with there's some other good names out there you could bring into the conversation, which I'm not going to, but you just feel that they're of the old way. There needs to be a bit more new thinking come into the club, and there needs to be a new angle of approach on the structure of the team. Because like I'm trying to highlight with how I would see it structured, there's a lot to be done here. And looking at the existing system for how much heavy lifting the legal guy and the finance guy are actually doing or not doing, depending on how you want to think of it as, I don't think simply hiring a new director of football is going to be the silver bullet that changes everything. It might change, as and I said, with a director of football, you want to think much more of that kind of 1 to 3 year vision, kind of lifespan of like managers in and out, players in and out. That's what they focus on. And it would help with that in the immediate term. And we greatly need that, is obviously what's happened this season. But it's only a sticky plaster, because if this is still the people that are in charge of everything else that I've detailed in the video that the club should be doing, is meant to be doing, talks about doing, we're not going to get any further forward any quicker. And again, like I've been at pains to express and emphasize throughout this video, the number one thing that only actually really needs to change is everyone getting on the same page, pulling in the same direction, and actually putting the football progression first over the business one. Delegate appropriately, put the right people in the right positions, and the structure really doesn't matter too much if you can get the right people into the right places. I've got no idea how long this video will actually be once I've edited it down. I'm not even sure if you guys have enjoyed it or not. And I did try my best to make it concise and coherent, but we did have a wee bit of going around to do all over the place. Let me know about your thoughts and feelings in the comment section down below. On screen and now some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Hail, hail, and I'll catch you on the next one.